why are we not talking about the triple meltdown? And it is the biggest threat to the health of this country, economically, socially, philosophically. Now, Gina McCarthy was head of RadNet. Now, RadNet did not work. And we were hammered. The ratings that the plume came over us in March of 2011 were gigantic, and RadNet magically did it. Now she's head of the EPA. A colleague and I named Tony, we call it Plumegate or the Pacific Genocide. It's 924 days, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. Now, Senator Wyden and Senator Boxer have called for hearings. Why are we not discussing this in Washington?
Thank you. First of all, tell me more about your work with Senator Boxer. Tell me what she's got in mind.
Well, this is the San Onofre right here.
That's the one in Orange County?
No, that's Diablo Canyon. San Onofre has been shut down. By the way, the reactor is parked in our, and that's a whole nother commentary out here on the Energy Solutions site, which is, well, they've been delisted. These are the people in charge of our nuclear waste. We've got, San Onofre's been shut down. We exposed the lies that was going on there. They had an accident there that went unreported for 12 days, and it was a bunch of freelancers. Senator Boxer has called for hearings. Senator Wyden went to Fukushima, Japan, just a few days after it happened. He reported to Congress, and he said it's much worse than I thought. Now, Gregory Jacko, who's head of the Nuclear Regulatory Committee, resigned over this. Now Allison McFarland's head, which I know, she has ties to this university. And this thing is a catastrophic night. It's a triple meltdown that is being pushed in the Pacific. Now, the USS Reagan went in early. Now, Senator Boxer has called for hearings. She, head of the one committee, Senator White has called for hearings, and we've gotten no traction. And I think this would be a great issue for you, as we have so much experience with downwinders in Utah. Scott Matheson. By the way, Eileen Walker's mom was my second grade teacher, and she was an amazing woman. And I really appreciate you coming here and giving us the opportunity. But I think because I really believe that you can be the transformational senator to break down this clash that we have. I have a lot of hope for you.
Thank you, thank you. And I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. My dad was a downwinder as well. I lost him to cancer 17 years ago. It was only after his death that we learned that the cancer he had...
I'll sit down and let you talk.
Based on the type of cancer he had, and where he had lived and when he had lived, he was a downwinder, and his cancer was linked to that. And so, how are you doing, by the way?
Well, I was given 2 months to live, and it's 23 months, and I'm alive. I was down to 119. By the way, we have an incredible bone marrow transplant center there at LDS. It's a gentleman named Fimbo Peterson. It's an amazing, and they hire all these beautiful Weber State nurses.
Wonderful. And I think you answered my question. I was about to ask you where the LDS mission was, and I was slow to get the joke. That was your LDS mission.
Yeah, I'm still on it.
So first of all, Ron Wyden, who's my Democratic colleague from Oregon, he's the chairman of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. I served on that committee with him. He's become a good friend, and we've worked across the aisle on a number of issues where he and I agree. When I get back to Washington on Monday, I'm going to talk to Ron Wyden about this very issue.
And I'll give your aide my information. I've been the spearhead on this whole fight from this university, by the way. And so I'm glad to hear that you are friends with Wyden, because he's been out on front of this issue, and I think you guys can really do a lot for this country in addressing this.
He's a good man. He and I have a number of pieces of legislation we're working on together related to our Fourth Amendment rights, trying to protect our Fourth Amendment rights against excessive interference by the NSA and other intelligence gatherings.
Thank you so much.
I'll work with them on this.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
This is One for the Record. I'm Diana, and today is September 22nd, 2013, and here are your news updates for today. Okay. September 22nd is coming out of E&E News. The operator of an Ohio nuclear plant along Lake Erie has found several more cracks in the concrete building housing the nuclear reactor, and says some cracks found earlier have grown a bit. Several hairline cracks were found in the structure's 2.5-foot thick concrete 2 years ago. First Energy determined they were caused by wind-blown moisture seeping into the concrete and freezing during a blizzard, and that the structure's integrity wasn't affected. Toledo Blade, September 21st, 2013. Despite the determination that 3 of the cracks had spread, Ray Liebit, First Energy site vice president of David Bessie, said the building is still safe. Heads up! If I lived around there, not far, I would start taking action. Something might be going on over there. Heads up, alrighty then. Says cracks discovered in U.S. nuclear plant's reactor shield. Cracks from 2011 are spreading. Group. The structure is compromised. NRC, public safety not compromised based on the current information. Inspector heading to site. Heads up. I would take action and maybe get out of the way of that. I would not live around that. Start making plans and I would get away from there. Wouldn't live by any nuclear plant. Alright. Moving on. Let's get rid of that. So heads up. Alrighty then. The Watchers watching the world. How a human colony on Mars might look like. We already know, don't we? Alrighty then. How vertical farming can change the world. And changing landscapes of Santa Rosa Island, California. So it's changing out there. Heads up. Also, breaking news. Let's see what's in there. Only thing I saw, which was 54 minutes ago, state media. At least 20 dead after Typhoon Yuzagi hit southern China, Hong Kong. That's coming out of NBC News 54 minutes ago. Alrighty then. Okay, Max, hold on. I'm going to go take the dog for a walk. Please be prepared for anything. I'll see you tomorrow on the flip side. I'm uploading Dr. Deagle and a couple other things. Out. Out. Yes, we're going out. He's saying out. Alrighty then. Take care and be prepared. And I'll see you on the flip side tomorrow. Stay safe. And try not to live by any nuclear plants.
Welcome to Hour 3 of the Nuclear Medical Report for Friday, the Preparedness, Civil Defense, Earth Changes, and Space Weather Hour, with our preparedness expert and consultant, former Special Forces forensic investigator John Moore, who has his own radio program, with co-host Ann Morrison, scientist, expert on Earth changes, ultraviolet light in the upper atmosphere, volcanoes, sinkholes, earthquakes, and other Earth changes, and also tracking the issues of what's going on with the latest on the viral plagues that are ready to leap onto mankind from animal sources around the world, including SARS-2 beta coronavirus, H7N9, and H3N2V that's now acquiring lethal genes to re-energize itself now 2.5 months early. John, what's the latest on what you're hearing? And you mentioned earlier this morning a report you had from Lindsay Williams, who's often long-winded but often correct, unfortunately, and other sources you have, and what's going on, and we'll hear John's report first.
Okay, well, before we get to Lindsay Williams, there's an attorney named Orly Tate. I'm sure you've heard of Orly.
Yeah, we've had Orly on the program. She's very good.
Well, this week, she's got hard evidence that a certain Indonesian citizen, she's got a hold of the college application for Occidental College of a certain Indonesian citizen.
Search no more. We are the GCN Radio Network.
Welcome back, and we have a couple of things to discuss. We want to start off with the pandemic flu. As I mentioned in previous shows, the only vision that I and my wife Michelle had 7 years ago that occurred at identical times, I called her and told her I was in the middle of a panic of having a standing back vision of smelling burning bodies and seeing them being stacked up, and knew that a pandemic was coming. And, you know, people wonder, why do you have all these things like Nucleodine, Silver 100, Alcimed ready? Why do you have a first-line defense kit? I remember first looking in 2003, that's 10 years ago, at my journals, and I saw an article by Dr. Osterholm, who is, by the way, a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and is at the University of Madison, Wisconsin. He's considered the top virologist in flu in North America. And he basically said a pandemic flu is coming. He was able to convince the United States to find out the truth. And we have 3 candidate superviruses coming, and if you're not prepared for them and not prepared to hunker down and not go outside so you're not an enemy combatant, you're going to get sick and very probably infect your family and die. So you need to face the music that the globalists are moving step by step to have plausible deniability to make sure that these viruses do get out. They don't prevent transfer and spread. They don't track the initial cases arrived by airplane, or etc. And they're not going to do any measures to prevent the virus, and there's no possible vaccine that could save or stop people. We saw that in the movie Pandemic here just about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. People need to be aware that an airborne plague is probably, maybe later this fall, but most likely in 2014, we're likely to see a major super plague hit us. We're going to have multiple waves. It won't just hit in one wave, like 1918. The Asian flu struck multiple times between 1957 and 1968, over 11 years. But these viruses, H7N9, replicates faster than any other virus in history. It has a capacity to infect deep lung tissue very quickly. The SARS coronavirus can be a minor infection in the upper respiratory, but if it gets to your lower respiratory tract, you have a 10% chance of survival if you get intensive care. And a large percentage of the people that survive have permanent neurological damage, permanent lung damage, and then many of them are on dialysis for the rest of their life or a ventilator. This is not a party. You need to pay attention out there, and if you're a health provider, if you're a knucklehead doctor and think you know more than Dr. Deagle, have the nerve to call into the program and try to say your credentials and why you think this is not true. Because you healthcare providers are going to be the first with all proper reverse protection to die. You doctors, you nurses, your EMTs, you're going to pay attention right now, or you're going to face the music that most of you are not going to be around here after these plagues hit. You're going to die first and hardest because you're not protected.
Yeah, and what they've discovered with the H7N9, that's the bird flu virus that's coming out of China. And it's it's over 30% fatal. And it has a property that is absent in any other bird flu strain. And that is that the virus can stick to the lung and respiratory cells, and also to cells from the mucous membranes in the nose and throat. These are called epithelial cells.
So in other words, it doesn't just go to the upper respiratory tract and then work its way down. It can go immediately to the lower lungs and put you in respiratory failure within 24 hours.
Right, but the fact that this virus can affect the nose and throat will make it easy to transmit through coughing and sneezing.
Right, and if it has a typical incubation period of 7 to 10 days, it can spread to many co-hosts that'll get the incubating virus going while the other person is collapsing in the freeway. And what happens when you get a cytokine storm is you start getting what's called disseminated intravascular coagulopathy, end up going to cardiogenic shock, seizures, hypoxic shock, and a DIC that causes bleeding from every orifice. So this is a B movie, but it's not a B movie, it's real. When this hits, this virus, H7N9, if it has these 2 genetic changes in just 2 amino acid positions, it will be the most deadly virus in history. Then we have a second candidate virus, the beta coronavirus 2, and this is going to make the SARS virus, the original one, look like a garden party. And then we have H1N1 transferring its lethal genes to H3N2V, which is the current flu virus that showed up 2.5 months early. Why? We have no idea. But the virus is acquiring the lethal genes from H1N1, and if any of these recombine with each other, the H3N2V
is person-to-person transmission in the MERS. That's the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus. And it has been documented. Now, they do think that they have a possible treatment for it. And that they've been testing it on primates, and it shows that a combination of ribavirin and interferon alpha-2b stops the MERS.
I'll ask you a couple quick questions. First off, chemotherapy. We had Dr. Moskowitz from the University of Washington in St. Louis, who is not only a geneticist but a nephrologist and expert in infectious disease, and he recommended on this program 4.5 years ago the idea of using chemotherapy to stop this cytokine storm, because you usually die from your own immune system reaction. These drugs, firstly, you're going to have a very limited supply. Number two, they're only going to partially control the virus, and if you don't catch it early enough, the viral load itself will trigger off a cytokine storm, and that's why you're going to get cardiac arrhythmias and sudden death, or DIC. So the idea that somehow we're going to be protected or they're going to make a vaccine is just wishful thinking. You need to have our antipathogenics on board now, taking them regularly. You need to have NIOSH masks. You need to be able to hunker down and not become an enemy combatant, because when this virus hits, nobody's going to get gasoline. Nobody's going to get food. Anybody going out in the streets is asking for trouble. And after the fourth day, when people realize the federal government and Obama is not going to help them, they're going to freak out. You know, as Charles Salente says, when people lose everything. Welcome back. And John, you have some information. You have a analysis rebuking the climate change, global warming garbage. And Ann, you mentioned that the ISON comet now can be seen with even homemade astronomers. I have a telescope and measure early in the morning. You can see it when Mars is in the sky because it's approaching Mars. John, tell us about your paper and these principles, because we now know the new Prime Minister of Australia has rebuked and called it a load of crap, otherwise known as gastrocolonic inertial syndrome, which is all these enviromaniacs have. Give us your analysis.
Well, it's not an article I wrote. It's written by credentialed scientists, and it's been difficult for these men and women who are, in fact, credentialed scientists to go public for any number of reasons. It could be harmful for their career. They could have funding cut off. But this particular article does have these men and women coming forward and saying there is not consensus among credentialed scientists as to human activity causing climate change. It's something that's very important. I've been forwarding this to people that from my website for quite a while, and it's important for people to understand that there is not even close to consensus among credentialed scientists in their chosen fields that climate change has anything to do at all with human activity. In fact, at the Greenland ice sheet, it's something that's very important. I've been forwarding this to people that from my website for quite a while, and it's important for people to understand that there is not even close to consensus among credentialed scientists in their chosen fields that climate change has anything to do at all with human activity. In fact, at the Greenland ice sheet, the ice is melting from the bottom, not from the top.
Yeah, and the reason why it's from the bottom, the Gakkel range is 1,500 kilometer long range as high as the Swiss Alps. It's 22,000 venting mid-oceanic ridges with temperatures of 740 degrees roughly, melting from the bottom, like when you boil a pot of water. There's increased ultraviolet light also causing minimal melting at the top, like the Greenland ice sheet after it put these particles and bombed over Greenland last year. What's happening is we're heading into a modern-type ice age. When I heard Will Thomas, who's been on this program before, he's not an environmentalist, he's a journalist. And he made the statement that we're having a release of methane hydrates that are showing up in the Arctic, and that the polar bears are dying because they can't get ice floes. It's a pile of garbage. This is the fact. We are releasing methane hydrates, and there's under-oceanic volcanism occurring because we approach of a red dwarf star that's in deep space coming in, probably twice the distance of Jupiter. We have ISON comet and other hyperelliptical comets coming into the inner solar system that are pushed in by this object. Mid-oceanic ridges with temperatures of 740 degrees roughly, melting from the bottom, like when you boil a pot of water. There's increased ultraviolet light also causing minimal melting at the top, like the Greenland ice sheet after it put these particles and bombed over Greenland last year. What's happening is we're heading into a modern-type ice age. When I heard Will Thomas, who's been on this program before, he's not an environmentalist, he's a journalist. And he made the statement that we're having a release of methane hydrates that are showing up in the Arctic, and that the polar bears are dying because they can't get ice floes. It's a pile of garbage. This is the fact. We are releasing methane hydrates, and there's under-oceanic volcanism occurring because we approach of a red dwarf star that's in deep space coming in, probably twice the distance of Jupiter. We have ISON comet and other hyperelliptical comets coming into the inner solar system that are pushed in by this object. It never approached the inner solar system. ISON in the next 2 months will be 16 times brighter than the moon. It can be now viewed in the early morning. These comments, including the Nuke trial, which is coming up, will be November 13th, 14th. The outgoing director of DHS, Napolitano, stated that it's a 100% certainty that we will lose power control due to a coronal mass ejection caused by the sun and, quote, cyber terrorism. Well, we only have cyber terrorism if you attack Iran or China, because they're the main groups that are going to have cyber terrorist armies of technicians that can attack us from another country or Russia. So the fact is, what they're doing is they're trying to use a natural event and amplify it so they can get further control of the population. We are at very grave risk of a CME, not just then, but for weeks and months afterward, increased solar storm activity. And they know this, and they're not hardening the grid yet, but they're going to do a grid trial, which we know when they did Chernobyl, that was a trial a day before a holiday where they didn't have all the technicians on staff. They made us through a few wrong switches, and they caused a meltdown called Chernobyl. These idiots are going to do the same kind of garbage, not just here, but across Canada, the United States, and Mexico, which could lose large chunks of our power grid and cause a power blackout, not because of a CME, but because of stupid government moves in the United States and Mexico, which could lose large chunks of our power grid and cause a power blackout, not because of a CME, but because of stupid government moves to test the grid, which is not properly integrated or hardened. This is dumb.
Right. Here's the full title of this article. It's titled "Climate Change Reconsidered, 2011 Interim Report." It comes from the Science and Environmental Policy Project Center for the Study of Carbon Dioxide and Global Change up in Chicago, Illinois. So it does bear looking into, and people need to inform themselves.
Yeah, know what's happening. We're more likely, and this is by experts like Dr. Tim Ball and other experts, Dr. Hababil Azimazatov from the Russian Space Agency, Dr. Easterbrook from Britain, and other experts around the world who met 2 years ago June, and stated very clearly by 2014 we'll be in the full grip of an ongoing start of a Maunder-type ice age that will last around 2074, 2075. The Chinese have confirmed this, the Russians have confirmed it, the international scientists, and yet idiots like Obama don't want us to be energy independent, don't want to end up with, cleaning up the pollution from using energy, don't want to release Tier 1 science for other alternative technologies, because if we have UV shock, we won't be able to convert carbon dioxide back into oxygen, so the world oxygen level will drop, and the only way you'll be able to live